Amen. This morning we have the privilege of hearing from someone who up until 4 days ago was a member of our team. Thank you. But is still a great member of our church, and much more than that, a great member of the family of many of you here. Pastor Aaron and Rachel have been here on the team for over 6 years. Am I getting that right? I've got that right? But has grown up in our church for a very long time. Aaron is an old man, and he'd probably say, but I'll never be as old as you. And he'd be right about that. He has been a great story of the work and the ministry that God has done in this church in Pratt, that this church could raise up leaders like Aaron. And so we are happy to celebrate him this morning. Over the last 6 months, I feel like I didn't get to have him as a team member nearly as long as I'd hoped, but over the last 6 months, I have laughed at some of Aaron's jokes. I have cringed at many more, I would say. I have appreciated his wisdom. I have appreciated his hard work for the children in our church, for the families in our church. And it has been a little bit surreal because this month has been packed with so much. Between us getting ready for the business meeting and selling Welton Street and team members being out because they thought this was a good time to have a baby, right? And then Aaron, knowing that Aaron was going to be stepping out of ministry, it's been wild. And so in some ways, I don't feel prepared yet to say goodbye to this guy from our team. And I think he knew that because when I walked into my office a little over a week ago and I opened the door, Aaron and Rachel's face was everywhere. Everywhere. Ben, do you have that? Everywhere. Listen, I don't know if you understand when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. This is only 7 pictures or so. I could have taken 1,000. I promise you. I mean, I opened a drawer. Aaron was staring at me. I opened another drawer. Aaron was staring at me. I pulled a book off my shelf. Aaron's face fell out from between 2 books. Little jars in my office. Aaron's face had been cut out and shoved into that jar and was distortedly looking at me through it like, I see everything you do, right? I turned a lamp on. His face was hiding in my lamp. I moved 2 pillows on my couch. Aaron's face was under one pillow. Rachel's under the other. Someone's butt is going to be on that, right? I moved my office chair, and under the mat that protects the carpet from my office chair, staring up at me, Aaron and Rachel, right there. Everywhere. Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. This guy's face is everywhere. Someday, when I'm old and decrepit, maybe even in heaven, there will be some other pastor in that office, and something will move in that office, and Aaron's face will show up, and they will be like, what is the story behind this? So it's a great reminder of who he is, how he's served. I know that you guys have years more invested in memories and great stories with Aaron even than I do. So I want to ask you this morning if you will give a warm welcome to Aaron Hirt as he comes up this morning.
You will find more faces in the days to come. I prophesy that. Well, I'm excited to be here this morning. I told JD, I was like, man, it's been I think over a year, my wife, I don't know, because Marvin was here for 9 months preaching, and I don't know, quite a few months before that, I'd never preached, and so it's been over a year. So I'm excited. I do love kids, but I love preaching to the adults, and I'm excited for what the Lord has for us in this next season, for you guys in this next season. And it's always encouraging, too, wherever she is, Emma, with the song she picks, goes right along with the message. JD, and talking with, giving, even some of the things he said, just right along with the message. And so the Lord is doing something this morning. And so I'm excited. And so we're going to go to Micah, and we're going to kind of be in the entire chapter this morning, bouncing around. We'll start in Micah chapter 1. But if you've ever read the book of Micah, and you begin to go through here, it's a bit confusing because Micah seems to have been, I don't know, bipolar or ADHD or something, because he's like, the Lord's going to kill you. Hey, the Lord's going to redeem you. Hey, the Lord's going to do this. Take this away, take that away. Hey, the Lord's going to redeem you. And back and forth and back and forth. And it's like, what is going on with Israel and Judah and the Lord and Micah prophesying this? And like, it's just a bit confusing because he's calling out their unjust actions and bringing down judgment upon them. But then he comes back with a hope of redemption. And then he goes back into it with destruction and judgment and back and forth. Okay, and in all 7 chapters, it just bounces back and forth. Like 2 to 3 times in each chapter, it's like destruction, redemption, and it's a bit confusing. Okay, and so I want to give kind of a backstory of why this book is like this. If you go all the way back to King Solomon, and after King Solomon, when his son took over, okay, Rehoboam, the people divided. They split. And Judah stayed with the lineage of David as their king with Rehoboam, and Israel decided they wanted to be their own government, and so we had northern and southern. So we had northern Israel, southern Judah. And so there were these 2 kingdoms that were supposed to be one kingdom. There's 2 kingdoms that were meant to be united as one king, or as one kingdom with one king, and that was God. And we know the story of the Israelites, starting all the way back, Cain and Abel, and how it just progressed to where man thought that they could be their own kings. When we were created to have one king, and that is God, as his son Jesus, and that is the Holy Spirit, to be our king and to be a part of his kingdom. And so they split, the people revolted, they split, we had northern and southern. The time between the split and the exile for Israel was roughly 160 years, and Judah was 320. So when they split, all the way up to when Micah began to prophesy these things, it had been 160 years. It had been 160 years. So if it's been that long, some people that Micah was prophesying to, they'd never been unified under one kingdom. It'd always been 2 kingdoms. It'd always been them and us. It'd always been the hypocrites and those that stuck with the lineage of David, the bloodline, the chosen bloodline of God. And so there's these 2 kingdoms, and they were always butting heads. They were always arguing. They were always fighting. Okay, and then they had other nations coming at them as well, and attacks from the enemies, even when they were fighting amongst themselves. And so there was all of this happening. So Micah, again, dealing with these people. That, first of all, their kingdoms were built on division. Most of the people, their entire life, all they knew was division and disunity and 2 kingdoms. They never experienced under the one kingdom, okay, under David and part of Solomon, or in Solomon. And so Micah had a tough job. He had a really tough job bringing what the Lord wanted to do with these 2 kingdoms. Okay, and I don't think God intended for their kingdoms to be divided. Okay, because he created it as one kingdom, God's chosen people, but it happened. So this morning I want to talk to you about 2 kingdoms. And which kingdom are you? Okay, which kingdom are you? And I'm not talking about, are you the kingdom of the devil, and you're a sinner, you're not saved, you don't believe in God, and you're in salvation, you come to church. I'm not talking about those kingdoms. Because there were people in Israel that loved God. There were people in Judah that loved God. They were in relationship. They were in right relationship with him. Okay? And so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about within the church, we have 2 kingdoms. I might step on some toes this morning, especially yours, Daniel, because you're right up front. Do I have to stay in these tapes? Am I confined? It'd be best. Okay, so people online don't just see nobody here. All right, just making sure. I like to move around. So, okay, so 2 kingdoms. I'm talking about 2 kingdoms within the body, within the church. Okay, because Israel and Judah, there were people that were in right standing with God in both nations. Okay, and they were all the chosen people of God. And so when I say two kingdoms, don't go to, well, kingdom of the earth and the sinners and the people that are evil and, all these people that are pushing unjust laws and regulations and going against God and all this stuff, and in the church. I'm not talking about those two kingdoms. Yes, there are those two kingdoms. But within the kingdom of God, I feel like there's a division within the church as a whole. And I want to address that and talk to you guys about that. And I just want to see, okay, where are we at as a church? Where are we at as a body? Because let me tell you, if there is disunity in a body, guess what? There are two spirits. Because if there is one spirit, there cannot be disunity. Fact. Deal with it. If there's two spirits, why did Israel and Judah divide? Because there were two spirits. So Micah 1, it starts off by stating all of the cities, okay, in Israel and in Judah, in both nations, okay, and he's talking about every city that is the major problem, because there was a select few, I think around like 9 or 10 cities that were kind of the main hubs of these nations, and all the problems and the things and the unjust and all of these things that was happening was flowing from those cities and controlling the nation. And so he begins by stating all of these cities and the major problems, and just begins to address a lot of the leaders and the I can't even think now. Okay, a lot of the leaders and the prophets and the priests and things like that were working in the temples and all these. They weren't addressing the common people. Micah was addressing the leaders, because they were the ones that were operating in greed, operating in bribery, and all of these things, and bringing unjust things to the nation. So when he's talking to the leaders. Okay, well, are you guys leaders? Are you government officials? Are you prophets? Are you priests? The kids respond better than you guys. Come on now. If you don't know, that's fine. Just raise your hand and say Jesus, and it's right. That's what the kids do. Okay? But no, I mean, if you look at it from a physical world, from an earthly point, yeah, I'm not a government leader. I'm not a this. I'm not a leader in the church anymore. But I'm a leader in the kingdom. I'm a priest in the kingdom, and I have the governance and the authority of Christ, just like he had the governance and authority of heaven on his shoulders. I have that same authority and governance on my shoulders because Christ is in me. So yes, this is addressing you. You're not just a common person. You're not just a common congregant. You're not just a common believer. You are the government of God's kingdom. You are the leader of God's kingdom. You are the priesthood of God's kingdom. And so this is for us. In Micah 1, verse 16, it says, O people of Judah, shave your heads in sorrow, for the children you love will be snatched away. Make yourselves as bald as a vulture, for your little ones will be exiled to distant lands. Some of you are following this scripture to a T, because you're already bald. It's a joke, okay? All right, anyways. I'll stop. Okay, and so Mike is addressing the generational line here, the generational inheritance. Okay, yes, in these times, there were nations that would come and overrun other nations, and they would take the young men, they would take the young girls for wives and other things, and the young men to be slaves, or they would kill the young men so that you would be powerless and not have an army. So yes, it's addressing that, but there's more depth into that. I feel like in God's kingdom, there's been a split and a divide, and why does about 70% of kids leave the church? 70% of youth, 70% of young people leave the church when they get out from underneath the home. Well, it's because our colleges are corrupt. Well, it's because of this. Well, it's because of this. No, it's not. Quit putting the blame on somebody else. Jesus never put the blame on anybody. Okay? He owned up to who he was. Now, did Jesus fail? Well, no. Okay? But Jesus, he didn't put the blame on everybody else. Well, just if the leaders would do this, then I wouldn't have to die on the cross. Well, if they just do this, I wouldn't have to die on the cross. I wouldn't have to do this. I wouldn't have to put up with this. I wouldn't be persecuted. No. He fulfilled his mission no matter what. And in these two kingdoms, okay, when I say the kingdom of heaven, that is the kingdom that God created his people to be in, and the kingdom of earth is just viewing things with an earthly eye. And so those are the two kingdoms that are within the church. Now, are there people that are saved in both? I think so. But those that are in the earthly kingdom, okay, like Israel, they left the lineage of David, the bloodline of David. Okay, I hope you guys can track with me here. Okay, they left God's intended purpose. They're the ones that left how God created it. They're the ones that said, we can rule ourselves. We don't need God's chosen king. We don't need what God has intended for us to have. And so in the church, I feel like there's been this divide. And so why are 70% of our youth leaving the church? Well, it's not the college's fault. It's not social media's fault. It's the church's fault. Because we've given the enemy permission to snatch our kids. We've allowed our children to be exiled because we've believed the lies of the enemy, and we begin to shift and put the blame on all these other things instead of taking responsibility as a church in serving our young people. Did you know the most productive time of your life? They've done a study on this. The most impactful, productive time of your life is from the age 60 to 70. Your most impactful time of your life is when you're 60 to 70. The second most impactful time is when you're 50 to 60. Or no, sorry, 40 to 50. And then the third is in between there. So literally from 40 to 70, that is your most impactful time of your life. Yet, we've been raised in a society and a culture that when you get to that age, you're done. I'm getting close to retirement. I'm done. I can do what I want. I can do this. I can do that. It doesn't work like that in the kingdom. The kingdom never stops. Now, can you do this when you're 70? Hey, I hope so. Okay? No. Your energy might not be as much, but man, you've got so much more than energy. You've got so much more than strength and muscle and all these things. And so when you're in the kingdom of heaven, it never stops. You don't say, well, I'm done. I've done my part. I've done my duties. I've served there for this long. I've served in this for that long. Yes, you're going to have to let some things go. Things are going to change, but the serving still happens. The impact still happens. Generational inheritance of righteousness, purity, and holiness happens because we don't say we're done. We don't say, well, these kids are just confused. Well, these kids just won't listen. Well, they're just disrespectful. Well, they're this. We keep pushing forward and we keep serving. We keep asking the Lord, you know what? I can't do that anymore because I am 70 or I am 60. I can't go and push a lawnmower up and down a hill to mow the yard of a church, even though we have a riding lawnmower, okay, or whatever. I can't do that, God, but what can I do? What do you have for me? What do you have in my hands right now that I can use to serve the kingdom? And this is where Israel got off. They began to shift their focus off of how God intended his kingdom to look like on earth. They began to just hope for the Messiah to come because things were getting bad. Rather than, you know what? The Messiah is obviously not here, so I'm going to keep doing what God places in my hands to use and to do and to serve with. In the church, we've gotten so full. I don't know how many times I hear from people. I'm going to step on some toes. I got this word back in June, and I knew it was for our church. Clear back in June, we talked about it in our noon prayer, Jackie, Chris, and I, and Tom. And I knew this was a word for our church, But I guess the time is now. I get so tired of people saying, man, this is bad and this is bad. Did you see this on the news? Did you see that on the news? I hope Jesus returns. You hypocrite. That's what I'll say. You selfish little Christian. Why do you want Jesus to return? Because things get bad. It's prophesied things will get bad. But it's also prophesied that there is redemption for our nations. There's redemption for our community. There's redemption for you. There's redemption for your family. There's things to do, things to serve, things to love on, people to serve, people to love on. There's problems to be solved by the church with a creative solution from a creative God. Yeah, we come, we sit in our pews, and we do this, and we worship, and we do our Bible studies, and all those things are really good. I love those things. But you're falling back with Israel, rather than going forward with Judah and the lineage of David and the bloodline of David, which eventually is the bloodline of Jesus Christ. And if you say you're saved and you're covered in the blood, then you are in the bloodline of Christ. You are his brother. You are his sister. You are a citizen of heaven. And you have a calling, a purpose. And it might not look like preaching. It might not look like leading Bible study. It could be in your career. It could be wherever you're at. God has given you something in your hands to use, to serve the earth, to bring heaven to earth. And so Micah is trying to pull Israel and the chosen people back to this concept, this mindset of we are kingdom people and we are meant to bring heaven to earth. And we'll get into kind of what that looks like here in a little bit. I hope we're not here for 3 hours. Let's get going, Jesus. Mary Jane, I'm not going to go there. Rabbit trail. All right, so Micah, moving on. I'm going to just kind of go through the chat. If you want to go back and read all of the text, you can, but we don't have time to do that. We're going to spend a lot of time in Micah chapter 4 here in just a bit. But Micah chapter 2, verse 5. Others will set your boundaries then. Okay, hold on. Others will set your boundaries then, and the Lord's people will have no say in how the land is divided. Others will set your boundaries, and you will have no say in how the land is divided. Eventually, Israel and Judah, the two kingdoms, the two nations, they are all exiled, one by the Assyrians and one by the Babylonians. So literally, their rights are stripped. They have no say. If an Assyrian says, I want this vineyard, I want this land, I want this house, I want this, I want that, you give it to them. And the church has surrendered territory that we were never intended to surrender. That's the school. That's government. That's your workplace. That's your family. The arts and media and entertainment. All of these things, the church was meant to influence. The kingdom of heaven was created, or we were created with the kingdom of heaven flowing through us to influence these areas. But instead, they've influenced the church, and we've just given up on them. We've retired. We've done our part. Well, it's a lost cause. Well, it's this. So boundaries and territory, we've given up. We've let boundaries slide back. We've given up whole territories. For what? For what? And then we question, why is the world so bad? Why is this so bad? Why is that? And you know what? A lot of these things, it wasn't anything we did. It was the generations before. It was multiple generations. Look at the progression from Adam and Eve till now. I mean, the enemy is, what is he out there for? To kill, steal, and destroy. He will kill anything he can kill. He'll destroy anything he can destroy. He'll steal anything that you give him. Because he has no right to anything that belongs to a kingdom kid, a kingdom son, a kingdom daughter, a servant of God. He has no right to any of that. But so we had to have given it to him. They traded what God had promised for something much of much less value. So just ask yourself, is there territory, maybe in my family, maybe just in your own relationship with God, maybe in your workplace? I don't know. Is there places that you've allowed the enemy to push boundaries back, or maybe you've just given him that territory because for whatever reason? There's multiple reasons. Have you traded something of much less value? Have you traded something that God has given you for something of much less value? Maybe it is something in your family. Maybe you're like, well, I don't have time to spend a lot of time with my kids because I have to work to provide for them. But yeah, the Bible says a working man don't eat. True. But I believe when we set our priorities, the provision of God will step up in a way you've never seen. I've seen it in my own life. Thank you, Jesus, that I did have a pretty flexible job here at the church, that I could leave early and go home if I need to go home. Okay, and I understand some of you are like, well, I'm required to be there 8 to 5 or this or that. Okay, great. But then you get home and you watch sports all evening and don't spend time with your kids. Trading something of much less value. Well, when I get home, I'm just tired and I just want to watch TV. So my wife and I, that's what we do. We watch TV. We enjoy it. Good. I enjoy TV too, but my wife and I limit our TV time because we're not going to trade mindless watching for building relationship and connection. So those are things within the family. Well, for me to get that promotion, I kind of had to walk the integrity line just a little bit. Oh, don't walk that line. Or to get that business deal, I kind of had to maybe manipulate some numbers or some of this or that. Right, you can succeed doing those things, but all through Proverbs it talks about that. It ain't going to last. So what have you traded? What land have you given up? What territory, what boundaries have moved? Okay, every boundary in the Bible that was set by God's people, okay, they would put boundary markers, or they put memorials when something amazing would happen. And a lot of those memorials and things, they still know where those things are at. When God sets a boundary, it is set, unless we give permission for it to be moved. When He sets a boundary in our life, that, you know what, I'm going to limit my TV time. You know what, I'm going to hold my line of integrity in my business. You know what, I'm going to vote liberal or I'm going to vote Democrat if their values are aligning more with God's. Y'all might get offended by that. But while I'm stepping on toes, I'll step on all 10. Okay? Every part of our life should be ran through the filter of our kingdom relationship, our heavenly kingdom. Whether it be business, whether it be your marriage, your kids. But so often we exclude God from business because, well, He don't care about that, that's of the earth. Or, oh, He don't care about this because it's of the earth. It doesn't matter to Him. Yes, it does. We've surrendered that territory. We've moved that boundary. And you can do things without God and do really good because you are a very powerful, creative person, even without God. Because He created you. Whether you're a believer or in relationship with Him or not, it rains on the just and the unjust, is what the Word says. You can do a lot. But your impact and what you have looks completely different. Okay? Israel was overtaken by the Assyrians before 160 years earlier than Judah was taken over by the Babylonians. Why 160 years more did they get of freedom? Well, they stuck with the lineage of David, the bloodline of David, the bloodline of God's kingdom, the bloodline of Jesus. And I believe that's my theory of why they got to last a little bit longer. I'm going to have to skip some here. Moving on to Micah chapter 3. verses 1 to 3. Am I making much sense this morning, or are you confused? I'll have some like main little points that I'll give you guys here in a bit. But if you just write those down, you'll be good. You'll go to heaven. I'm just kidding. Micah 3, 1 through 3. I said, listen, you leaders of Israel, you are supposed to know right from wrong, but you are the very ones who hate good and love evil. You skin my people alive and tear the flesh from their bones. Yes, you eat my people's flesh, strip off their skin, and break their bones. You chop them up like meat for the cooking pot. That's interesting. We could make a movie out of that. People say the Bible's boring. But I was reading that, and I'm like, what? Like, what in the world? Like, this is, like, if this was part of The Chosen, it would be a mess. And obviously, it's not speaking like this is actually what you're doing. Okay, this is metaphorical, figurative. But skin my people alive, tear the flesh from their bones, eat my people's flesh, strip off their skin, break their bones, chop them up for meat for the cooking pot. Like, that is pretty intense. If anybody saw anybody doing any of these things to somebody, they would try to stop it. Or they would at least call the authorities. Probably be too late, but you would do something about it, wouldn't you? Or you just freak out and run. Because when we get in shock, we don't think straight. But like we would do something about it. If this was happening and everybody knew about it, there would be an uproar. But yet, we're doing this to each other all the time. We're making each other the enemies. Within the church, there's disunity because we're stripping each other's flesh, we're breaking each other's bones because we're talking about each other, or they did this and I didn't like it, and they did this and that, and well, I don't believe in that, and they believe in that, and this and that, and all these things, and there's two spirits, there's disunity. We make each other the enemies when all in reality, the enemy is so good at convincing me that Jackie is the enemy because she looked at me wrong. Or that stranger in the grocery store is the enemy because, or that checker because he didn't smile at all when I was talking to him. And I'm a joyful person. They should smile. Or whatever. Or I get home and my wife had a rough day and she's frustrated, and so she kind of barks at me. And so I'm like, listen here, woman. I'm providing for you. I'm at work all day, slaving. And so I make her my enemy because she did something that I didn't like. I don't know how many times, maybe other men can say, yeah, that happens to me. But I've just learned this. Like, I'm still learning it, but I know about it. So if the kids are just a mess that day, and I get home and she's flustered and mad and she's done for the day, and I can tell and I know it's because the kids were being kids. They're in here and they're listening. So the kids were being kids. I would very easily snap on the kids, bring down the hammer, because you messing with my bride. And that's not right. I'm making the kids my enemy. Because they're the ones that did this. It's their fault. They are the one that hurt her. They did this to her. They did that. And you don't do that to my wife, and I'd make them the enemy. And I would overreact, and I would punish my kids in a way that was not of the kingdom of heaven. For all of you spankers, I do spank my kids, so don't worry. Okay? There's an extreme both ways. We won't get into that today. If you want to talk about it later, we can. Okay? But I would make them the enemy, and I would defend my wife. I'm doing the right thing. And so when it's talking here, Israel and Judah, they were breaking each other's bones. They were stripping each other's flesh. I mean, they split up. Two nations. And yet so often within our family, within other believers that you work with, within the church, we make each other the enemies when in all reality they're not. Like, I don't care how bad any of you treat me. I'm not going to make you the enemy. If you get hurt or offended all the time by another believer, you better be looking within yourself, because there's something there that you need to work on. There's an earthly kingdom in there that's living, and the enemy is using that. He's taken a little bit of territory in you, and it might be something you don't even realize that happened to you a long time ago, or it could have been something that happened recently. But because we live on the earth doesn't mean we have to act and say and talk and do like the earth. We act and say and do like heaven. Y'all want to get to heaven, so a lot of you want to get to heaven so bad. Well, why don't you just bring heaven here? Well, I can't. What was Jesus' ministry? Oh, it was heaven walking on two legs, in flesh, in man. That's what Jesus was. He was heaven on earth. He was the incarnate of heaven, of God, walking here on earth. And then Jesus said, greater things will you do than me. Have you done greater things than Jesus? I haven't. But man, I'm doing everything that I can to be under the authority of God. And okay, it's not about works. Don't get me wrong there. But like, I'm pursuing the kingdom of heaven. I'm renewing my mind and my heart to hear the Father more, to see what He's doing more, so that I can align myself with Him. To attach myself to Jesus, to attach myself to God, where I am one with Him. And that's what the church is about. In Micah 4, we're going to get to some points here, if you all are confused. I hope not. Micah 4, 1 through 2. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's house will be the highest of all, the most important place on earth. It will be raised above the other hills, and people from all over the world will stream there to worship. People from many nations will come and say, come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Jacob's God. There He will teach us His ways, and we will walk in His paths. For the Lord's teachings will go out from Zion, His word will go out from Jerusalem. So the Lord's house will be the highest of all places. His temple will be exalted and sought by people and by nations, is what it's saying here. Okay, but interesting enough, in these texts, when it mentions house in verse 1 and 2 here, okay, you look that up, the original text, it's actually translated down to mud and mire. To mud, to mire, to dirt, dust. And it's like, house, mud, mire. That's interesting. If you ever see anything in Scripture that kind of pops to you, just say, that's interesting. And then wait on the Lord. He'll tell you. Or He'll give you a thought, I promise. He loves to reveal things to His kids. Anyways, that nugget was free. In Genesis 2:7, what was man made of? None of you done JBQ, I can tell. I'm just kidding. Okay, yeah, dirt, dust. Okay? So in Genesis 2:7, okay, man was made from dust of the ground. He was made from dirt. Okay, different translations say dust, dirt, clay. But prior to verse 7 in Genesis 2, and in verse 6 it says that, this is the verse right before the verse that says, God took the dust and made man. Okay, I promise I'm getting somewhere. Verse 6 says that water, some translations say mist, came up from the ground and watered the whole earth. That's interesting. Rain falls down. An unusual rain, right? The water came up rather than down. Then God made man out of the dust. I'm not sure, nor am I concerned, about how this happened. It's God. But There was an unusual rain. There was the dust, the dirt. And then it says God breathed into him and brought life. So there was an unusual rain. There was dust, dirt, clay, mire, and the breath of God. Those three things. And then later on in John 9, verse 6, Jesus spit in the dirt, mixed it, and rubbed it on the guy's eyes, and he was healed. Been blind from birth. And that's John 9, verse 6. Unusual way to be healed. Have you ever rubbed dirt in somebody's eyes? Not your brothers or sisters, to get back at them. Okay, and they were healed? No, I haven't. Apparently, this is just the way my mind thinks. Jesus had to spit in the dirt because it was dry. Right? Okay, because it says that he spit, and then he mixed it, and he took the spittle and rubbed it on the guy's eyes in some translations. So again, Jesus' spit, the dust, and the breath of God. Because, Jesus is God's son. He had the breath of God, the breath that brought life to Adam, to man. So again, both those instances had those three things dealing with dirt. So three things as citizens of heaven, as living in the kingdom of heaven while here on earth, you have. You have life, the breath of God. You have power, Jesus spitting. Jesus spits at you, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. Okay? And y'all might think, man, he's going really stretching this as far as he can to get his point across. Okay? And then the house here in Micah 4, it's talking about the house, the temple, the place of God. Okay? Mud and mire. So you have his presence. So you have life, power, and presence. Because you are a citizen of heaven already, if you've given your life to Jesus, you have life, power, and presence. So you have creative, growing, progressing life inside of you because God breathed into you at salvation. Okay? Look at any plant. Not any plant, but plants, what do? They grow, and they grow, and they grow, and grow, and then they produce fruit. And then does that plant die? Oh, yeah, but it has a seed, and the seed grows and grows and grows and forth, and going and going and going. It keeps going for generations. So your life does not end when you die, when you are in the kingdom of heaven. It does not die here on earth. Yes, I know you don't die because you go to heaven. But it doesn't die here on earth because you've produced seeds in people around you, hopefully your kids, and so they're living that life of producing and serving and living the kingdom. So it's an ever-growing, progressive, creative life that you live, and you're creating more life. Guess what, men? You can create life. The world is right. It's just not how they're saying that hopefully it'll happen one day. You do create life. Never mind. Oh, thank you, Jesus, for telling me when to shut up. Next, so life, power. You have power inside of you because of the Spirit of God that was placed in you since the beginning of time. You are the seed of the second Adam. We all are the seed of the second Adam being Jesus. So therefore, you have power. You have authority. Amen. Secondly, presence. You have the presence of God. You are a walking image, the incarnate person of Jesus. You are a son and a daughter of the King. His presence is felt when you enter a room. Do you believe that? Do you believe when you enter a room, when you enter the grocery store, people can tell that there's something different in this environment? There's something different, something shifted. I know people that when they walk into Costco, they walk into Dillon's, they walk into their workplace, and they can feel a heaviness, All they do is to smile and say, hey, how are you doing today? Or hey, I'm so glad to see you. Or just little things, and they smile at every person. And by the end of the day or the end of the time that they leave that store, they can feel a shift in the environment. Why? Because they're living in the kingdom of heaven. They're having heaven flow through them into the earth as kingdom kids, as kingdom citizens, as a son or daughter. But yeah, we have so much of the church that's just hoping for heaven and doing the right things. And I guess if that's what you want to do, then great, I guess do that. But man, you have so much more available. Seek ye first the kingdom, right? And then all of these things will be given to someone else, right? Oh no, given to you. Seek ye first the kingdom and find out from God, what do you have flowing from heaven to earth through me to serve, to be generous, to love, to bring joy, to whatever, to make money. God uses people, believers, to make money, to fund the kingdom, to be generous with. Your motives, intentions, and heart matter when it comes to that. You all were created to prosper. It says it in the Word over and over again. Why did some of the disciples, why and how in the world did their shadows heal people? What? Their shadows healed people. That is it. That is insane. Yet that should be an everyday thing for kingdom people. I'm not there yet either. But like, what? How did their shadows heal them? Like that is, comprehend that, please. Tell me how. It's because they were living the life that God intended them. They were walking in power and they were walking in His presence every second of every day. Second Corinthians 4:16 through 18 says this. This is in the Passion Translation. So no wonder we don't give up, for even though our outer person gradually wears out, our inner being is renewed every single day. We view our slight, short-lived troubles in light of eternity. We see our difficulties as the substance that produces for us an eternal, weighty glory, far beyond all comparison. Because we don't focus our attention on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but the unseen realm is eternal. Again, two kingdoms. We have so many believers looking to the seen world when they have the capability and the eyes to be able to see and view things through the lens of the unseen world, the realm of the Spirit. Why did Israel, when they were set free from Egypt, why would they rather go back to Egypt? Well, because they were seeing with their eyes that see the seen world. We at least had food. We at least had housing. We at least had comfort. We at least had familiarity. And we were better as slaves than being free. I think Moses and Aaron were the only ones viewing with their unseen eyes. I would almost say that most of the Israelites didn't even see the cloud of fire or the pillar of fire, the cloud that led them at day. Did they even see that? Like, I'm sorry, if I would see a pillar of fire following me at night and front and back in a cloud by day, like, do you think God's with us or not? Like, how were they seeing? How are you seeing? The person sitting next to you, how do you see them? Do you see them with your seen eyes or your unseen eyes? Do you see them how God created them? My wife has done things to me, and I've done things to her that's not right. But I've learned, even when she does something that might hurt me or try to offend me or cause pain or cause distance or whatever, or vice versa, me to her, like, I choose to see her how Christ sees her. And I'm like, you know what? That is not her. She's not acting according to how God created her to act. And I love her anyways. I serve her anyways. I don't get hurt. I don't get offended and start an argument or whatever. Now, is our marriage perfect? Do I get hurt sometimes or offended and say something I shouldn't? Yeah. But man, our relationship has thrived and flourished since we've learned to do that in our marriage, with our kids, with your coworkers, whoever, the stranger that you walk by on the street. See them in the unseen realm. See them as Christ sees them. I know it's a lot, but JD only lets me preach like every other year, so, I just got a lot built up. Well, he might not let me preach after this. I don't know. The life, power, and presence that flows from heaven to earth was shut off because the focus got reversed. The Israelites, a lot of believers, okay, they see it as the unseen flows from the seen. Well, if the worship is good, or if everything goes good, or if this is good, or if that's good, or if I raise my hands, or if I lay down and spread my arms and call like a chicken, or I don't know. Some people get weird in worship. Just saying. Okay, we base off what's happening in the spirit realm and the unseen of what's happening in the seen world. Like, man, if I got a $1,000 check in the mail for something I didn't know, whoo, praise Jesus. He's moving. He's doing good. You wonder why sometimes we flip-flop back and forth of God is good. Oh, God, why this? Oh, God, this. Oh, God, you're so good. Oh, God, why are you doing this? God, you're so good. We're viewing things, everything around us, with our seen eyes. Are you letting the life, power, and presence coming from the unseen, from heaven, flowing into the seen through you as a kingdom citizen, as a kingdom kid? We're getting closer. It continues on in Micah 3-5, and it talks about nations. It's already 11:40. But Mary Jane told me that chicken won't be ready till like close to noon, so I have to do this, okay? I'm being forced. Okay, I can do that. But continuing on in chapter 4 and 3-5, it talks about nations, and it talks about God meditating between the peoples and there being, okay, peace. No more war. They'll turn, okay? I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to paraphrase. They will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will no longer fight against nation nor train for war anymore. There will be peace and prosperity. Everyone will enjoy their own vineyards and fig trees, okay, and there will not be fear. The kingdom often looks foolish. What does the word say? God uses the foolish things to confound the wise, right? My wife and I, through this season of transition, we've just kept in mind to stay foolish. If it looks wrong in our seen eyes, we should probably pray about that thing. Like, Lord, is this really you? In my experience, the things that look foolish, the things that, like, I don't know about that. That doesn't logically make sense. That doesn't fit the budget. That doesn't do this. Like, those are the things that God has moved in my life. So go out there and be fools. You're dismissed. I'm just kidding. Okay? But things look foolish. I mean, nations turning what? Their swords into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. Well, how are they going to defend themselves? How are they going to this? Okay, so they're turning their defense, their own might, their own strength, into something that's going to help them produce something. It's going to help them To what? Till the ground, to plant the seeds, to harvest, to do all these things. Where do you have a sword drawn, kind of like Peter, where you should be operating the plow? Where do you have a spear spiked and ready when you should have a pruning hook? So foolish. Stay foolish. Live in the life, power, and presence of God's kingdom. Heaven flowing to earth. Stay foolish. I heard a story down in, I think it's Oklahoma or Texas. A guy in the oil field, a believer. He'd just given his life to Jesus like a few months back. And they were needing frac sand. And it's a specific kind of sand. And he drove, the Lord told him in a dream, I'll tell you where to find it. And he said, okay. Weeks went by, didn't hear nothing. Driving down the road, traveling somewhere, and the Lord said, right there it is, in that field. So he found out who owned it and everything and did all the legalities of stuff. And the people around that area were like, dude, you're crazy. They have I don't know, what do they do? What's it called when they like scan the ground to tell what minerals and different things and sands and soils are all there? Like they've surveyed that entire thing multiple times over the last 50 years, and there's nothing there. There's no frac sand. It's not the right kind of sand. Blah 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 blah. Dude, don't. Like you're gonna waste your money. And he said, nope, it is. So they went out and did whatever they did to find and harvest that. They got to digging, and they found one of the largest deposits of frac sand, that specific kind of sand, in that area. And it had been surveyed and everything. How many times? Stay foolish. I mean, that's crazy. God deposited that there for him to be a testament of God's goodness, to be a testament of his glory. I mean, how many conversations did that guy have with people in that area about it? Well, the Lord told me that it was here. What was the fruit from that? Other than, he got a lot of frac sand and millions of dollars. But what was the fruit from that? The people saw God move. Not in the church, not in a revival stadium, out in the middle of a field, digging for frac sand. That's the kingdom that we're meant to be in. The kingdom we're meant to live. Living in the life, power, and presence of God, of heaven. Heaven on earth now. Okay, 1 Corinthians 1:27. But God chose those whom the world considers foolish. And this is not the only verse that states this. There's probably a handful of verses that states, actually says God chose the foolish or the meek or the puny or whatever. But you look at every person God chose to use mightily in the Bible, they were flawed. They were the weakest. They were the unseen by everybody around them. Okay, but God chose those whom the world considers foolish to shame those who think they are wise, and God chose the puny and powerless to shame the high and mighty. He chose the lowly, the laughable in the world's eyes, nobodies, so that he would shame the somebodies. For he chose what he is regarded as insignificant in order to supersede what is regarded as prominent. And 29-31 is really good there too. That was in the Passion Translation again. So they have their pruning hooks, they have their plowshares, and they're going to use, the nations are using that to produce something. What has God given you to produce something? To produce something for his kingdom. Okay, and then it says, live off your own vines and your own fig trees. Well, what does that mean? It's simple. Don't be concerned about your neighbor. Okay, it mentions in there that, hold on. It mentions, that there is nothing to fear. There will be nothing to fear. Well, do you know what fear does? Paralyzes you. Fear causes disunity. It separates you. It paralyzes you. Okay? Disunity shifts our dignity, and we begin to lose respect for one another. We lose sight of each other's worth and value. And we don't see the worth of each other, so we begin to get envious, we begin to get in fights, we begin to revenge, we start to covet, and the list goes on. We do what we can do to get ahead. And so living off your own vines means don't live in fear. Your own vine comes from heaven. You will be provided for. You don't have to strive. You don't have to step across the line of your integrity or your character or out of the alignment of God to get ahead. Live off your own vine. Off the life, power, and presence that God has for you. It's enough. Align your priorities and your prosperity will just come. Not just in money, in joy and peace and love in your family, in your marriage, in your connection with your kids, in your relationships, in your leadership skills, in whatever. Prosperity is so much more than just money. Well, that's what we get focused on. So live off your own vine. Because you're right here, heaven to you to earth. Live off your own vine. James 1:5, and if anyone longs to be wise, ask God for wisdom, and he will give it. He won't see your lack of wisdom as an opportunity to scold you over your failures, but he will overwhelm your failures with a generous grace. James 2:5, so listen carefully, my dear brothers and sisters. Hasn't God chosen the poor in the world's eyes to be those who are rich in faith? And won't they be the heirs of the kingdom? Hold on, let me reverse that. And won't they be the heirs of kingdom realm he promised to those who love him? You will be the heir, not heirs, I'm sorry. You know, you can laugh at it. My grammar's below the concrete. Okay, heirs of the kingdom realm he promised to those who love him. All right, I'll be closing here in just a little bit. We're on page 8, and there's 10, so we're getting close. Did somebody just say, oh, it was a kid, wasn't it? It was a kid. I do this in kids ministry too. I can see it in the kids' faces. They're just like, when is this guy going to be quiet? Okay, Micah 4:11-13. Let's turn there real quick and read. Now many nations have gathered against you. Let her be desecrated, they say. Let us see the destruction of Jerusalem. But they do not know the Lord's thoughts or understand his plan. These nations don't know that he is gathering them together to be beaten and trampled like sheaves of grain on a threshing floor. Rise up and crush the nations, O Jerusalem, says the Lord. I will give you iron horns and bronze hooves, so you can trample many nations to pieces. You will present their stolen riches to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of all earth. Just FYI, next time if I preach again, just don't do it on a family Sunday, because I preach long, and kids, you know. No, just teasing. Okay, so it's talking about the nations coming against Jerusalem, coming against Israel. Raise your hand if you've ever had anything or anyone come against you. Y'all are liars. Raise your hand, okay? Y'all have experienced somebody coming against you. I promise you. You do not get out of your house if you've never had that happen. Well, then you have yourself coming against you because you're living not the life God intended. So you're against yourself. We have all had someone or something come against us at some point. Okay, and it's talking about all these nations coming against Jerusalem and Israel, the Babylonians and the Assyrians. Did they succeed? Yes, they went into exile, but then Micah goes into saying, but this is what's going to happen down the road. And I believe this will happen for you today if you choose to live in the kingdom of heaven with the life, power, and presence of heaven now here on earth. Okay? Why are sheaves of grain beaten at the threshing floor? Do we live in a community of farmers, or why did they beat it, right? To get the grain out. Okay, the whole would be beaten off, the chaff and all the excess stems and all these other stuff would be beaten off, and the grain would remain, right? So there was a separation that would happen from all the trash to the grain. A separation. A separation happens at the threshing floor. Why? So that the chaff and the hull and the stem and all these other things would be beaten off, and the grain remains, and the rest would be blown off. Blown into the wind to never be seen again. Right? I was working on this the other night, and I just really felt this, that there are people here that you need a separation to happen. You need a separation of the things that are devaluing you as a son or daughter. The Lord has created you to be full of life, power, and presence. You guys, you need a separation of the lies you've believed, the things that other people have placed on you, that your experiences have made you believe in a wrong way, to not see through the unseen. There's a separation that needs to happen in all of us, including myself. Because this life is a continual progression. Well, I'm not going to be perfect, so there's always something that God is revealing to me to work on within myself. Okay? If you're going to be in the kingdom of heaven, be teachable. Accept correction. Some of you just need a good beating. But let me tell you, the threshing floor doesn't damage the grain. You don't set the combine to spit the grain out the back or crack the hulls of corn or the grain and split it and devalue it. You set it just right to get the most value out of the grain and get rid of the trash. The threshing floor is designed to get rid of all the junk, all the trash, all the belief systems that are not of God's kingdom, that are not from heaven, and the grain remains. Your grain will not be damaged. The kingdom of the seen world hates the threshing floor because it knows what's going to happen. It's time for a separation of kingdoms and for the kingdom of heaven to flood the earth through his chosen people. You know, I'm just going to say it. The threshing floor is right up here at the altar. Well, God can meet me anywhere. You're right. But there's something that happens when you come up here. Why did Jesus... Now, obviously, there was times where he said, don't tell anybody, because his time had not come. But every time Jesus did a miracle, when his time was there, when his time was ready, he went to a place, and there were always Sadducees, there were always Pharisees, there were always leaders there present, and they would see it. Now you might say, well, they're just following him, just keep an eye on him. Well, maybe. But yet, he did it in front of other people a lot of times. Why did he do that? Well, there was a testament to it. Well, it drew others in to what he had. If Jesus did all these things in front of others, do you think the altar is of God or not? Because something happens when you're willing to let go of your pride and your this and that and get before people. You're getting before God in front of people. And you know what? Don't be concerned about your neighbor. Live off your own vine. And so yes, God can meet you in your chair, and I've seen it happen, God meet people in their chair. I've seen people get healed sitting in their chair during a message. But I believe there's something that happens when we can get before the altar, or before God at the altar. There's just something, I can't explain it. I don't know if there's really much scripture to back it up, but something happens. And when we can put ourselves around and before our brothers and sisters and pray for one another, create community, create family, it's powerful. And so, the threshing floor. What do you need to bring to the threshing floor? What do you need to get rid of? What needs beaten out of you? I'll do it. Oh, just kidding. One more thing in Micah 4:13. Okay, it talks about, I'll give you iron horns and bronze hooves. That's interesting. Horns often symbolize power and authority, and as most horns do, they project outward, right? In the Hebrew language, this projecting translates as to shoot out light. An iron used in this verse is referred to as cutting or piercing holes with an iron implement or tool. When we are equipped with life, power, and presence from the kingdom of heaven, we project and shoot out a light that has power and authority to pierce, cut through any problem, any lie, any hurt, any pain, or anything not in alignment with God's kingdom. Did you catch that? When we're living with the life, power, and presence of God's kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, we project and shoot out a light that has power and authority to pierce, cut through any problem, any lie, any hurt, any pain, or anything that is not in alignment with His kingdom. And if you don't believe that, you're cutting yourself way short. And you're cutting God's kingdom way short because He created you, because He needed you. Will He get it done through somebody else? Yeah, He will. If you're going to be that stubborn. Bronze hooves. Bronze is referring to the actual metal, but can also be referred to figuratively as the color of a serpent's mouth when open wide and hissing. So bronze, in this instance, was referring to the actual metal, but bronze also, in certain instances in the Hebrew language, can refer to the color of the inside of a snake's mouth when it's open and hissing. I love the Hebrew language. It is so deep. English is dumb. Like, this is. I mean, the Hebrew language, it is all intermingles. God knew what He was doing when that language was created. It's just amazing. Hooves, literally a claw or split hoof, but can also mean to break in pieces, to split, distribute, divide, deal, tear, and to part. When we are equipped with life, power, and presence from the kingdom of heaven, we break into pieces, split, part, tear, and divide the works of the earthly kingdom. We become distributors and dealers of all that God's kingdom has access to. It is an unlimited source of all things good in God. So when we are equipped with life, power, and presence from the kingdom of heaven, we break into pieces, we split apart, we tear and divide the works of the earthly kingdom. We become distributors and dealers of all that God's kingdom has access to. It is an unlimited source of all things good in God. So today, you have two choices. Be in the kingdom of the earth and keep hoping for the end and for heaven, or to see, hear, and act according to the unseen kingdom of heaven and experience redemption, community, correction, relationship, abundance, favor, and unity. To be equipped with life, power, presence that God has placed inside of you. It was placed inside of you well before you were conceived. You find the worst person in the world that's done the worst things, and I guarantee you there is a seed in there that God placed, that God created. Because all man is created in God's image. You were created in God's image. I can't even think. If Adolf Hitler was created by God and he had the seed of the second Adam in him, there's hope for you. I don't think any of you have been as bad as Adolf Hitler, have you? No, I don't think so. Like, you think of the worst person in history. God created them. Did they choose the right kingdom? No. One quick little story. I was reading an article of a church in Germany during Adolf Hitler's reign, and there was a church that was right on the rail line. And it was a rail line that they would haul the Jews to the concentration camps on. It was like the main line to one of the bigger concentration camps. And they would always haul the people to the camps on Sundays during church. Because the enemy loves to just cause distraction and to rub it in your face. And there was a guy, and they found a journal from somebody that was a congregant at this church. And he said that eventually we began to know when to sing loud, to drown out the sound of the cries of the people in the trains. So even if the pastor was up preaching and they heard the train whistle, they heard the tracks clickety-clack, he would put down what he was doing and pick up the hymn, and they'd all start to sing really loud until it was past. And then he'd put it down and he'd go back to preaching. Because they knew when to be the loudest to drown out the cries. And I read that and I'm like, it tore me up. I'm like, that's sad. Yet, we often do things to drown out the cries of the earth. We often do things to distract us from what we really need to do for God, to really be who He created us to be. The enemy places distractions and things in front of us, and we grab a hold of them because they might look good from the seen realm. But man, I heard that, and I never forgot that story. And I'm like, God, help me never to be like that, please. Give me the strength. Give me what I need. So you have a choice. You know, you might be saved, or you are saved. But you're like, man, I'm not operating in the fullness of God's kingdom. I'm just kind of living my life out every day, doing the same thing, being comfortable, being familiar, just trying to get by. And you can be saved and do that, I believe. I'm not saying you're just living full out in sin, but just coasting along. What if Jesus just coasted along? What if the disciples just coasted along? Where would we be at? But you have the life, power, and presence of a living God inside of you. Whether you're experiencing it right now or not, it is there. So you have two kingdoms to live in, to act in, to say in, to do in. Jesus, I love Jesus. All throughout the Gospels, what does he say? Like one of his biggest quotes, I do what the Father's doing, I say what the Father's saying. I probably pray that the most. God, just help me to do what you're doing. Help me to say what you're saying. Help me just to see you. Help me to see you. Help me have eyes to see in the unseen, to see people like you see, to love on them, to serve them, to be generous like you are. So you have life, power, and presence inside of you. I don't care where you're at. You might be like, well, I don't even believe in God, or this is my first time in church, or I've been in church for 60 years, or wherever you're at, there is life, power, and presence inside of you. I've told my wife, if I ever become a lead pastor, I would rather see an empty sanctuary knowing the people are out bringing heaven than see a full sanctuary knowing that none of them are taking heaven anywhere. I better watch my mouth. But personally, I would love to see this sanctuary half empty, knowing you guys are out there taking heaven whatever you're doing, taking heaven to whatever you're doing, whatever you're saying, however you're serving, rather than being here consistently every Sunday. Now, I am not saying the meeting of the saints is not important, because it is. But we've maybe met just a little too much and gotten a little too familiar, a little too comfortable. But Micah was saying, this is a Midwest closing, by the way, like a Midwest goodbye. Keeps going. But Micah at the very beginning was talking about the cities. And those main cities that were the problem. JD mentioned it last Sunday or a couple Sundays ago about the divorce rate in Pratt. We're like in the top 3 per capita for the highest divorce rate, or top 5. Second in the state. But I think national, we're like in the top 5 or 10, some like high per capita, obviously. And it's like, dear Lord, our city is one of those cities. But what are we doing about it? What are we using? We have our swords and our spears ready. Do we have our plowshares? Do we have our pruning hooks? And oftentimes a pruning hook is to cut your own limbs off. To cut off the things that you need to cut off to be fruitful, to be productive. But is our state one of those cities? Is your family one of those cities? Are you one of those cities? If so, there's life, power, and presence in you. I don't know if JD knows this, but man, there have been multiple prophecies about Pratt over the years. I can't say them word for word or anything, but I've just heard of them here and there throughout the district and different things. But there's been prophecies and words given to Pratt. That's going to be the epicenter of revival, the epicenter of God moving in these different things over the years. Yet, we're still waiting. Or God's waiting on us. JD can preach the best messages he can. He can be so full of the Spirit and be up here and do so much. He can go out in the community and do things. And it'll bring some people in. It'll do some things. But man, for our city to be transformed, for nations to be transformed, like it's going to take all of us. Maybe rather than preaching to people, hey, give your life to Jesus, you're going to go to hell. Maybe, hey, give your life to Jesus because he has so much for you in abundance. You felt so empty. Well, guess what? He has something for you to do. He has this. He has that. For years, and it works. Preaching hell works. Fear works. But fear is not a part, the fear that we use oftentimes is not a part of God's kingdom, of heaven. So maybe we need to shift our minds from the earthly seen to the unseen heavenly and how we approach people with the gospel. I know it's been a lot this morning. This is a heavy message. But like I said, I've been sitting on this since June, and I knew I had to. But you have life, power, and presence in you. What needs removed? What needs brought forth? Did you know that the kingdom of heaven, probably 90% of the kingdom of heaven, is blocked from right here, from your mind? Probably 90% of heaven flowing through you is blocked from your mind, your mindset, your systems that you have in place in your mind. That cause disbelief, that devalues you, that causes distrust, that on and on. Are you hungry yet? Not physically. I'm hungry physically, I'll admit it. So you have life, power, and presence in you. And today, February 5th, 2023, it can be your day if you want it to be. It can be the day that the shift happened. A lady that I'm part of a network with came out with a book, and it's called Own Your Own Shift. Yes, it's a play on words. Own your own shift today. Step out into the life, power, and presence that God created you to have. So I'm willing to stay in here. I don't know what they have planned over there, if I have to be in there or not, but I'm willing to stay in here with whoever wants or needs prayer or just to spend some time with Jesus. I won't have the worship team come up unless they want to. We can just play some music on the computer. But where are you at? You can't have one foot in one kingdom and the other in the other. It doesn't work. Have you ever tried walking like this? Moving? Everybody get up and try it. No, just kidding. You have life, power, and presence in you. So we're going to sound team, if you just want to put on some worship music, and you're like, man, like something jumped inside of me today. I want to spend some time with the Lord. If you want prayer for anything, I'll be here. I'm sure some of the other team members and stuff will be here. So let's just spend a little bit of time with the Lord, and then we can dismiss. If you have to go to prepare things or do anything like that, you're welcome to do that. But